Imagine a world consumed by water, not the gentle lapping of a shore, but a churning, world-ending deluge that scours the earth clean. Civilizations, with all their monuments and memories, dissolve into silt, divine powers, whether wrathful or sorrowful, pass judgment upon their own creations. And from the devastation, a handful of survivors emerge to face a silent, newly washed world, tasked with the monumental burden of beginning anew. This is not a story you hear once. It is a profound and persistent echo in the memory of humankind. The narrative of the Great Flood is not the exclusive property of any single scripture or tradition. It is a pan-cultural epic, a phantom wave that has surged across every inhabited continent, flowing through countless languages and surviving across millennia. It is carved into the clay tablets of Mesopotamia, whispered in the sacred Mayan codices, chanted in the Vedic hymns of ancient India, and painted in the dreamtime lore of indigenous Australians. It is as if the collective soul of humanity shares a deep, traumatic memory of having been drowned, cleansed by a cataclysm born from its own transgressions. But what is the truth concealed within this ubiquitous legend? Is it merely an allegory for the chaotic forces of nature? Could it be the manifestation of a shared, inherited trauma from some long-forgotten global catastrophe? Or perhaps, are all these disparate cultures, separated by vast oceans and insurmountable mountains of time, attempting to convey a single, universal truth in their own distinct dialects? In this exploration, we will navigate the currents of this ancient mythos. We will journey through the ages, uncovering how different civilizations interpreted their own great flood. We will delve into the esoteric traditions that view this symbolic drowning, not as a historical event, but as a spiritual necessity. And ultimately, we will seek to understand why the waters of chaos and creation always seem to return to purify, to correct, and to restart the great wheel of existence. Long before the book of Genesis was ever transcribed, long before Moses is said to have traversed the desert sands, and even before the revolutionary idea of a single, all-powerful God had fully taken root in human consciousness. A similar story was already being told along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is the tale of a great inundation that brought humanity to the very brink of extinction. And no, its origins are not found in the Bible. Its source lies in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and its hero is a man named Utnapishtim, the one who survived death itself, not through strength, but through the wisdom to listen to the divine. The Epic of Gilgamesh, with a history stretching back over 4,000 years, stands as the earliest known masterpiece of human literature. It is a sweeping poem, painstakingly etched onto clay tablets, that encapsulates the timeless themes that humanity would endlessly revisit. The desperate search for eternal life, the profound sorrow of being forgotten, and the primal fear of the all-consuming flood. In this ancient Mesopotamian saga, the assembly of gods portrayed as capricious, passionate, and terribly human in their impulses reaches a chilling decision. They will eradicate their human creations. And for what reason? Their divine slumber was being disturbed by the ceaseless noise of humanity. Indeed, the Sumerian deities were not seeking spiritual tranquility or righteous order. They simply desired quiet. However, a schism formed in the divine consensus. Ea, the god of profound wisdom, the celestial strategist who always found a way to bend the rules, chose to break the pact of secrecy. He warned the mortal Utnapishtim of the impending doom, yet he did so with sublime subtlety. He did not appear in a grand vision or speak with a thundering voice. Instead, he whispered the secret to the reed walls of Utnapishtim's dwelling. This is a powerful and elegant metaphor for spiritual intuition, for that inner voice that speaks not in words, but in knowing. The true initiate, the text implies, is the one who can hear what is left unspoken. Utnapishtim, comprehending the cryptic message, acted with urgency. He constructed an immense vessel, not with the curved hull we might imagine, but in the form of a perfect cube, a potent geometric symbol of stability, of the earth, of sacred structure in its purest form. Within this floating fortress, he gathered the seeds of civilization, his family, skilled artisans, the seeds of every plant, the genetic essence of the animal kingdom, and the accumulated knowledge of his time. He was not merely building a boat, he was architecting a capsule for a planetary reboot, a symbolic womb to carry the potential of a new world through the waters of destruction. For 6 days and 7 nights, a tempest of cosmic fury was unleashed. The waters did not just fall. They roared from above and surged from below, until the entire world was a formless, churning ocean. At last, the storm abated, and the great Kubak came to rest upon the peak of Mount Nisir. Utnapishtim's first action upon stepping onto solid ground was not to celebrate, but to perform a sacred ritual. He made a sacrifice, an offering of gratitude to re-establish the broken connection with the divine. For without that sacred bridge between the earthly and the heavenly, all that was saved would inevitably sink once more. Now, observe the intricate symbolism that follows. He releases 3 birds in sequence: a dove, then a swallow, and finally, a raven. This precise sequence would later be echoed in the biblical account of Noah. These are not merely birds, they are potent symbols. The dove represents the purity of the soul, the swallow, the hopeful search for a new home. But it is the raven, the dark-winged creature that thrives in the aftermath of destruction, that finds land. This detail is crucial. It tells us that the rebuilding of the world does not begin with the ideal or the pure. It begins with primal instinct, with the acceptance of the shadow, with the pragmatic will to survive in a ruined landscape. As a reward for his obedience and wisdom, Utnapishtim and his wife were granted immortality and sent to live at the very edge of the world, in a timeless paradise where the rivers of mortality do not flow. They are not lauded as global heroes. They are sequestered, isolated as eternal witnesses. The story suggests a profound truth. Those who have witnessed the death of a world can never truly belong to the world of the living again. And what of Gilgamesh, the epic's tormented protagonist, who sought out Utnapishtim to learn the secret of eternal life? Hearing this harrowing story directly from the survivor himself, Gilgamesh undergoes a profound transformation. He finally understands that true immortality is not found in the flesh, nor in the fleeting glory of heroic deeds. It resides in memory, in legacy, in the stories that outlive the body. And so, he returns to his kingdom, not with the elixir of life, but with something far more valuable: wisdom. He returns, at long last, fully human. So, what does this foundational version of the flood myth reveal to us? It teaches that the deluge is not simply a fact of divine punishment. It is a spiritual filter, a test to determine who is worthy of carrying the torch of memory into the next age. The selection is not genetic. It is a selection of consciousness. The survivors are those who cultivate the ability to listen to the subtle warnings, to perceive the signs in the world around them, and to build, with patience, silence, and reverence, their own inner arc. And most importantly, it posits that the ultimate destructive force is not water, but forgetting. The Great Flood, above all, is a metaphor for a catastrophic collapse of consciousness. If the Mesopotamian flood was a merciless punishment for a world that had become too loud, the telling of the story in India adopts a completely different tonality. Here, the flood is framed not as an ending, but as a graceful and necessary cosmic transition. Time in the Vedic tradition is not a linear arrow, but a grand, repeating circle. All things must perish, so they may be reborn, and the waters of the flood are not an enemy to be feared, but the cosmic midwife that delivers a new age into existence. At the very heart of this tradition, we encounter the story of Manu, revered as the first man, the progenitor of our current species. As the Hindu scriptures narrate, one day, while performing his ritual ablutions in a river, Manu cups a tiny fish in his hands. But this is no ordinary fish. It speaks to him, and more astoundingly, it possesses knowledge of the future. This creature is, in fact, the first earthly incarnation of Lord Vishnu, the preserver of the universe, manifested as Matsya, the divine fish avatar. Matsya delivers a solemn warning to Manu. A great cataclysm is approaching. The oceans will swell, the earth will be swallowed, and everything that is not anchored in absolute truth will be dissolved into nothingness. But there is a path to survival. Build a great ship, the divine fish instructs, and bring with you the 7 great sages, the seeds of every living thing, the purest of animals, and most importantly, the Vedas, the sacred texts. The imperative here is clear. Knowledge must be preserved. The mission is not about saving mere flesh and blood, but about safeguarding the eternal soul of the world. When the flood finally arrives, it is not a chaotic, sudden event. It is methodical, almost ritualistic. The waters rise as if obeying a preordained cosmic schedule. Manu fastens his massive ship to the horn of Vishnu Matsya, who then expertly guides the vessel through the tumultuous currents, leading it safely to the summit of a sacred mountain in the Himalayas. When the waters finally recede, a new cosmic cycle commences. A new Manvantara, a new age of humanity, is born. For Hindus, the universe is engaged in a perpetual, rhythmic dance of creation and dissolution, known as the days and nights of Brahma. We are all participants in this cosmic play of expansion and contraction. The flood, in this context, is simply the punctuation mark between acts, the deep, silent breath the universe takes before the next cycle of divine exhalation begins. Unlike the biblical narrative, where the flood is a unique and final judgment, here it is merely the interval. Within Hindu symbolism, water is often representative of Maya, the grand illusion, the phenomenal world of forms and appearances that veils the ultimate reality. The flood, therefore, is the force that dissolves these temporary forms to reveal the unchanging essence beneath. And Manu's boat, much like those of Noah and Utnapishtim, is far more than a structure of floating timber. It is the vessel of consciousness, the disciplined mind and spirit that can navigate the treacherous waters of ignorance and illusion without being submerged by them. But our journey does not end in India. Let us travel to ancient China, where the flood is not something to be escaped. It is something to be confronted and tamed. In the ancient traditions of China, the great flood story does not arrive as a verdict from the heavens. It manifests as a raw challenge from nature itself, a state of primordial chaos that demands more than prayer or faith. It demands profound, subtle wisdom and relentless, intelligent action. It is not a sentence to be endured, but a collective initiation to be overcome. The myth speaks of a legendary time when the rivers burst their banks. The celestial order seemed to be in revolt, and the earth itself felt poised to dissolve into a muddy disorder. Fields were inundated, villages vanished, and the people cried out for a savior. But a prophet did not arrive. An engineer did. Yu, known as Yu the Great, the son of an official who had failed at the same task, was chosen to face the chaos. He did something that was, at the time, unthinkable. He did not attempt to build massive dams to block the water. He did not try to stop it. Instead, he chose to listen to it. For 13 years, Yu the Great traversed the vast plains of China, meticulously observing the flow of rivers, mapping the contours of valleys, and listening to the silent wisdom of the mountains. He dredged channels, redirected the flow of mighty rivers, and sculpted the very terrain with a patience that seemed almost divine. Legend says he was so devoted to his task that he passed his own home 3 times without entering, and when he finally returned after 13 years, his own son did not recognize him. This is not the story of a hero with a magical sword, but a hero with a humble shovel, a powerful symbol of a central virtue in Chinese thought, the Tao, the way. Instead of confronting the overwhelming force of nature head-on, Yu flowed with it. As Lao Tzu teaches in the Tao Te Ching, nothing is softer or more flexible than water, yet nothing can resist it. Yu embodies the sage ruler who understands that chaos cannot be conquered by force. It must be harmonized and redirected. The flood in this myth does not come to destroy the impure or to select the righteous. It simply exposes those who are unprepared and elevates the one who knows how to listen to the symphony of the world. After successfully taming the waters, Yu not only saved his people, he established a dynasty and became an emperor. This is because, in Chinese cosmology, to rule a society well, one must first understand the invisible currents that govern both nature and human interaction. Yu ascended to the throne not through noble blood, but through profound spiritual merit. He overcame chaos not with brute strength, but with elegant harmony. And this, perhaps, is the most enduring lesson of the Chinese flood. The world does not need to be saved by miracles, but by humble, persistent, and adaptive wisdom. In the West, we often face catastrophe with faith and sacrifice. In the East, it is met with patience, observation, and adaptation. While the old world recounted tales of floods orchestrated by gods raining from distant heavens, the indigenous peoples of the Americas perceived the world differently. For them, The cosmos was not a stage for divine drama, but a single, living, interconnected organism. Water was its lifeblood, a sacred element that would sometimes revolt in order to heal an infection within the whole. In the sacred Mayan text, the Popol Vuh, we find one of the most starkly symbolic and brutal versions of the flood narrative. The first attempt by the gods to create humanity resulted in beings made of clay. They were fragile, impermanent, and unable to hold the divine spark. The second attempt was with wood. This wooden humanity was functional. They could walk, eat, and reproduce, but they were tragically flawed. They were without soul, without memory, and critically, without gratitude. They could not pray. They failed to acknowledge their creators. The response from the gods was a brutal and total reset. A rain of burning resin fell from the sky. Beasts became sentient and spoke. Rivers boiled, and stones rose up to crush them. Everything in creation turned against these wooden humans. Even their own tools and cooking pots attacked them. The world unraveled in a symbolic chaos where the creation itself rebelled against its unconscious creator. The reason was not that men were evil, but that they were empty automatons. Here, the flood is the revenge of life itself against mindless existence. It is Mother Earth severing ties with children who had become zombies. Among the Incas and their Andean predecessors, we find legends of a great flood, Unu Pachacuti, that submerged the valleys and forced the few survivors to seek refuge on the highest mountain peaks. In some versions of this myth, the creator god Viracocha himself unleashes the Deluge to annihilate a previous race of disrespectful giants, and thereby restore cosmic balance. When the waters finally recede, Viracocha walks across the serene surface of Lake Titicaca, and through the power of his voice, gives rise to a new, more enlightened humanity. The detail here is both subtle and profound. The new world emerges from water, yes, but it is brought into being by the creative word. Viracocha speaks, and reality conforms. The divine voice is what transforms chaos back into cosmos. The flood is not the final chapter. It is the necessary prerequisite for conscious creation. It is no mere coincidence that Lake Titicaca, the birthplace of this new cosmic order, is the highest navigable lake in the world. The symbolism is clear. After the Great Flood, only that which is elevated can survive, elevated in spirit, in ethics, in wisdom. The mythology of the Hopi people, native to what is now the southwestern United States, elevates the symbolism of the flood to an even deeper dimension, that of esoteric initiation. According to their sacred traditions, we are not living in the first world, but the fourth. Each of the three previous worlds was destroyed because of a fall into spiritual imbalance, with one of these destructions being a great flood. Those who had preserved their sacred connection to the Great Spirit were forewarned by the mysterious ant people's subterranean beings, possibly symbolic of an inner earth wisdom, and were guided into safe refuges deep within the planet's core. During the cataclysm, they lived underground, learning to listen to the silence of stone, to subsist on very little, and to master the virtue of humility. When the waters receded, they emerged back onto the surface to help rebuild the world, now more connected, more purified, and more wise. This myth is profoundly symbolic. The flood is not merely an external event. It is an internal journey into the soul, a descent into the deep unconscious, what the psychologist Carl Jung would call a return to the womb of the psyche. The underworld here is not a hellish place. It is the cave of alchemical transformation. Those who do not make this inward dive cannot be reborn. In the myths of the Americas, the flood is not a singular, historical event, nor is it a final judgment. It is a recurring cyclical test, a stark reminder that spiritual amnesia always carries a terrible price. The gods do not punish out of cruelty, but out of cosmic necessity. When humanity disconnects from its essential spiritual nature, the world itself reacts, and it reacts with overwhelming force. Now, let us return to the old world, but venture beyond the confines of official history, into the realm of esoteric tradition. Let us speak of Atlantis. Plato, in his famous dialogues, the Timaeus and Critias, does not present the story as just another myth. He frames it as a factual report, a historical account passed down from ancient Egyptian initiates. Atlantis, he was told, was a marvel of civilization, technologically, spiritually, and politically advanced. It was a continent island, where the divine descendants of Poseidon built magnificent temples of orichalcum, and where the priest-kings mastered the sacred harmony between heaven and earth. But then, a fatal flaw emerged. The noble pursuit of wisdom slowly gave way to an insatiable thirst for power and material wealth. Sacred knowledge became disconnected from ethical responsibility. And then, as if the universe itself were a self-correcting mechanism, the island was violently swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of cataclysm. The message is unambiguous. The fall of Atlantis did not come from ignorance, but from supreme arrogance. Atlantis was not punished by an external force. It imploded under the weight of its own spiritual hubris. In esoteric philosophy, Atlantis represents the zenith of what humanity can achieve, and simultaneously, the abyss into which it can fall. Many occult thinkers, from Helena Blavatsky to Rudolf Steiner and Manly P. Hall, view Atlantis not as a specific place, but as a symbolic memory of a highly advanced prehistoric age, a collective archetype of a world that perished because it forgot its connection to the divine. In the book of Genesis, we find the most widely known version of this story. Noah, a man deemed righteous in a world of corruption, is chosen by God to preserve life. He builds a colossal ark, fills it with pairs of every animal, and then watches as the world is drowned in a deluge lasting for 40 days and 40 nights. But the biblical text is rich with esoteric code. The number 40 appears repeatedly throughout the scriptures, and it is almost always associated with periods of trial, testing, and purification. The 40 years the Israelites wandered in the desert, the 40 days of Moses' fast on Mount Sinai, the 40 days of Christ's temptation. Symbolically, 40 represents the full duration required to transmute a soul, to complete a cycle of spiritual transformation. The ark, in turn, is more than a cosmic lifeboat. In esoteric interpretation, it is a hermetic matrix, an alchemical vessel wherein the old world, the old consciousness is dissolved so that the new can be born. It is a floating Athanor, the alchemist's furnace. And most curiously, at the conclusion of the flood, God does not impose a new punishment, but establishes a covenant, a sacred promise. The rainbow appears as the sign of this covenant, a symbol that destruction has given way to hope. In esotericism, the rainbow represents the full spectrum of spiritual light, a bridge between worlds, between the divine and the human, between different frequencies of being. The Bible may tell a simple story on the surface, but for those who read with initiated eyes, it offers a coded manual for the regeneration of the soul. In apocryphal texts, such as the mysterious Book of Enoch, the flood narrative takes on an even darker and more mystical character. Before the deluge, according to this text, a race of giants known as the Nephilim roamed the earth. They were born from the unnatural union of the sons of God, fallen angels, and the daughters of men. These beings taught humanity forbidden arts, metallurgy for crafting weapons, sorcery, the use of cosmetics for vanity, advanced astrology, and the strategies of war. These fallen angels corrupted creation, and the flood was a direct and necessary response from the heavens, a universal reset button pressed to prevent forbidden knowledge from falling completely into the wrong hands. But even here, there is a profound ambiguity. The knowledge itself was not inherently evil. The problem was its misuse, its detachment from spiritual ethics and divine wisdom. The same knowledge that can elevate can also destroy when it is wielded by a consciousness that is not prepared for it. This tension is the very heart of the esoteric path. Light that is misdirected becomes shadow. The sacred word, when misspoken, becomes a curse. The impure initiate becomes a tyrant. Finally, in the symbolic language of alchemical treatises, the flood appears as an essential and unavoidable stage of the great work. It is the phase of solutio, or dissolution. In this phase, the raw material which represents the alchemist's ego, the old world of ignorance, is completely submerged in symbolic waters, the aqua permanens. Nothing new can be created until the old form is completely broken down. There can be no gold without the initial putrefaction of the base matter, no purified spirit without the symbolic death of the profane self. The true flood, then, is not a singular historical event buried in the distant past. It is a cyclical state of human consciousness. It arrives whenever we, as individuals or as a civilization, have accumulated too much noise, too much ego, too much separation from nature and from the divine. It comes when the chaos of our inner world is finally mirrored by the outer world. But it is also, and always, an opportunity. Every act of destruction carries within it the seed of a higher reconstruction. Every wave that swallows the land also prepares the soil to bloom once more. And maybe, just maybe, the true purpose of the flood myth, in all its varied forms, is a desperate call to remember who we are and where we come from. The question that resonates through the ages is not, when will the next flood come? But rather, have you built your ark yet? Thank you for watching. If this video was helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And now, leave a comment below and tell us one thing you are grateful for today.